Good afternoon, everyone. It is now time to start the TCFD Summit 2020. To start the summit, Mr. Suga Yoshihide, Prime Minister of Japan, will give the welcome speech.
本日は世界を牽引する金融界、産業界のリーダーを
On the occasion of this second TCFD summit today, it is a great pleasure to be hosting leaders of the world's financial and business community. Humankind has overcome many difficult challenges. As we are currently facing the difficulty of an infectious disease, the fact that efforts are underway globally to shape a new post-COVID-19 society by building on digital innovations gives us courage and hope. Climate change is yet another great challenge. Momentum is building to create new industries and markets, seizing this challenge as a positive opportunity to generate innovation. ESG investment now exceeds 3,000 trillion yen, and companies and investors around the world are shifting to businesses that position sustainability as their core. Japan has achieved the second largest reduction in greenhouse gas emissions among the G7 members using our advanced technological capability and industry, academia, government initiatives. We will leverage this strength to create innovations that realize beyond zero carbon, namely reducing the accumulated atmospheric concentrations of CO2. We will present a picture of a virtuous cycle of environment and growth, which will contribute to global decarbonization. To this end, Japan has decided to host the first Tokyo Beyond Zero Week, consisting of 6 international conferences that will discuss innovation, finance, and international cooperation in the energy and environmental sectors. Today's TCFD Summit is one of the 6 conferences. The TCFD, which encourages constructive dialogue among investors and companies, is designed to use the power of finance to support companies that are working on climate change solutions. Over 300 organizations that support the TCFD in Japan, the most of any country, have presented to the world a set of actions for achieving a decarbonized society. The government of Japan will support the use and further advancement of the framework led by the TCFD, reaching across the globe. I hope that this series of international conferences will stimulate exchanges and cooperation between Japan and the world, moving the entire world closer to resolving our common challenges.
Now, Mr. Kajiyama Hiroshi, Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry, will also give the welcome speech representing the organizer.
I'm Kajiyama, the Minister of the Ministry of Trade, Economy and Industry. As part of Tokyo Beyond Zero Week that began on October 7th, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry is hosting 6 international conferences on energy and the environment. The conferences present the world with a picture of the key innovations required to build a global roadmap to carbon neutrality and find pathways to reduce the levels of CO2 emissions already in the atmosphere. Just a year ago, on October 8, 2019, the world's first TCFD summit was held in Tokyo, bringing leaders of industry and finance together from all around the world. The discussions at last year's summit gave investors and company executives worldwide significant momentum for tackling climate change. Over this past year, more than 500 organizations in the world newly endorsed the TCFD, increasing the number of global supporters to over 1,400. As the host, I am pleased that the second TCFD summit is being held online today, allowing for collaboration with leaders of global business and financial communities and for taking further strides on climate change action. At last year's summit, we agreed on the importance of utilizing information disclosed following the TCFD recommendations for constructive engagement instead of divestment. We also share the view that this information should be used not only for risk assessment, but for opportunities, that is, the potential to create new businesses in which climate change actions lead to innovations. For example, full-scale experiments have begun toward operationalizing artificial photosynthesis technologies. I went to see it myself and was surprised by the technology and dedicated efforts of the team. New environmental technologies are discussed during Tokyo Beyond Zero Week. When needs are materialized and investors finance them, seeds of technology will bear fruit as social changes. At today's summit, I look forward to the dialogues among investors and business people, followed by discussions on financing innovations as opportunities, and to carving out the path for new possibilities of utilizing the framework of climate-related disclosures. Based on the discussions at last year's TCFD summit, over 300 organizations in Japan, the most in the world, expressed their support for the TCFD and are actively disclosing opportunities created by climate change. Last month, METI established the Climate Innovation Finance Strategy 2020. We are undertaking a detailed review of how opportunity assessments can be made in TCFD-aligned disclosures, both for the transition to a decarbonized and low-carbon society and innovations for significant CO2 reductions. Today, as round one of this initiative, we will release a list of about 300 companies, which we identify as companies taking on the zero emission challenge, companies that are boldly embarking on innovation initiatives towards the realization of a decarbonized society. We share the lessons and know-how obtained from these efforts so that the global TCFD community enjoy the benefits. Climate change is an urgent issue to address. Japan will develop innovations to go beyond zero, reducing atmospheric CO2 to achieve global carbon neutrality. Further, through establishing a mechanism of financing, Japan aims to accelerate the adoption of innovations in society and realize a virtuous cycle of environment and growth. I'm confident that this summit will contribute to advancing constructive discussions.
To move on to opening remarks, Mr. Valdis Dombrovskis, Executive Vice President of European Commission, will give an opening remark.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity of the Task Force of Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. Climate change is a permanent, intensifying threat that is not going away, and finance has a key part to play in tackling it. Investors already show a clear interest in financial products and services that can assist in mitigating climate change. They need sustainability-related information so that they can take informed decisions and identify investments with a positive environmental impact. This is where the TCFD recommendations are important. They provide authoritative guidance on how companies should report climate information. The European Commission remains a firm supporter. Let me quickly update you on what Europe has been doing. Last year, the EU revised its guidelines on how companies report climate information, integrating the TCFD recommendations. They show how companies can comply with the EU's non-financial reporting directive and meet the TCFD recommendations at the same time. Our next step is to revise and strengthen this directive. Most respondents to our public consultation said that the non-financial information reported by companies was insufficient. A large majority of them supported using the EU classification system or taxonomy as a way to define environmental disclosures required by the non-financial reporting rules. We'll present a proposal on this early next year, and again, the TCFD recommendations will provide a key reference point. I see the TCFD as closely linked to sustainable finance, vital in the broader context of the European Green Deal. This is our strategy for Europe to become climate neutral by 2050 and as a stepping stone, raise our 2030 emission reduction targets. The Green Deal also aims to integrate sustainability considerations in all aspects of our economy. This will be especially important for Europe's economic recovery from the coronavirus pandemic. As we raise our ambitions for reducing emissions, we will need even more investment. Public money will not be enough. Only private sector can provide the scale of investment needed. So in the coming months, we will present an updated action plan for green finance. It will focus on three main areas. Firstly, improving disclosure of climate and environmental data so that investors are fully informed about companies' sustainability before they invest. Then, giving more opportunities to people, companies, and financial institutions to identify credible sustainable investments. This could be done by using clear labels for retail investment products and by developing an EU green bond standard. Lastly, managing and integrating climate and environmental risks into the financial system. As you can see, the TCFD spirit will not be far away in our new strategy. To conclude, I would like to stress the EU's strong belief in the importance of global cooperation in this area. Climate change is a global challenge. Our response to it should also be global. This is why the EU will keep sustainable finance high on the international agenda. It is the thinking behind the International Platform on Sustainable Finance, where countries exchange and compare best regulatory practices to scale up sustainable finance globally. In their free trade agreements, the EU and Japan have a structure for financial regulatory cooperation where each side offers to inform the other early on about new initiatives and with a chance to comment. The platform shares the same principle of best endeavor with this EU-Japan cooperation. I would be delighted if Japan decided to join. The platform would benefit a great deal from Japan's presence and vice versa. I'm sure the EU and Japan will continue to work closely together on sustainable finance in the years ahead. I wish you a successful summit.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Mark Carney, Finance Advisor to the Prime Minister for COP26 and UN Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance, will also give an opening remark.
Hello, it's a great pleasure for me to join this TCFD summit for the second year in a row. And let me begin by commending METI for their leadership in not just convening this summit, but putting into place the types of strategies that are necessary to achieve net zero and a sustainable climate. The emissions development strategy of Japan, the renewed focus on reducing Japanese financing for coal, is clearly important. But at the heart of this, and what is so heartening, and the reason I wanted to attend, and I very much wanted to attend in person, and I'm sorry that I'm only doing virtually, but at the heart of Japanese efforts has been the private sector and the simply remarkable and dedicated efforts of the Japanese private sector. As you are aware, over 200 Japanese corporations joining the TCFD over the course of the past year, bringing the total number to 300. The top of the TCFD league table, fully 20% of the companies and organizations that are actively supporting TCFD. This is hugely important. What's also encouraging is the discipline with which these recommendations are being put in place. The METI survey showing that about 80% of Japanese companies, are implementing 4/5 of those recommendations, and again, showing the leadership for the rest of the world. I want to talk a bit about the way forward and make a couple of points. First, there is updated guidance, as you would be aware, on how to implement the TCFD, including sector groups and sector-specific guidance. There will be this month a new implementation report that will come out, which will assess the performance of TCFD across sectors and across jurisdictions, which will be clearly important. But the focus over the course of between now and COP26 in Glasgow in November 2021 will be to shift from voluntary private standards to find pathways to mandatory implementation. And in this regard, Japan's leadership puts itself in a very good place to help shape that process. Quickly, our objective for the private finance work for COP26 is to put in place the foundation so that every single financial decision can take climate change into account. Just like you take into account interest rates, credit risk, future cash flows, you'll have the information to take into account climate risks and, very importantly, climate opportunities. Now, the foundation of that is TCFD disclosure. As I just mentioned, we will look for ways to make that mandatory in different jurisdictions. In some countries, that will be through legislation. In others, it will be through securities disclosure standards. In others, through accounting disclosures, such as the IFRS process. But we'll be working together to have a consistent or as consistent a system as possible. The second pillar of the strategy is risk management. This is for the banks and the insurers, and the ability to think about climate risk, particularly climate transition risk, between now and where we need to get to, and to develop the tools and the management expertise in order to minimize those risks while maximizing the opportunities. The third pillar is around reporting. So that's for the asset managers, the insurance companies, the asset owners, and the banks to be able to portray where their exposures are to climate risks and opportunities in a way that's both fair and true, but also well understood by the clients that we ultimately serve. And lastly, what we're working on is to develop a cross-border market for nature-based solutions and carbon offsets. A blueprint will be ready early in the new year, and we'll look to have a pilot market in place by the time of COP26. All of this, though, goes back to the type of dedicated work that is being led by Japan in getting the right information about climate disclosures, not just the static disclosures where companies are today, but how they're managing the climate-related risks, where they see the opportunities, how they're governing the strategies, and how they're putting them in place in order to build a better world for everyone. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to the organizers again. My congratulations for everything that you've done. Arigatou gozaimasu. Ganbatte.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Mary Shapiro, head of the TCFD Secretariat and Vice Chair for Global Public Policy at Bloomberg, and Senior Advisor to the founder, will give an opening remark.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Shapiro, Vice Chairman for Global Public Policy at Bloomberg, and I lead the Secretariat for the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 2020 TCFD Summit. Before I begin, I'd like to thank the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, the TCFD Consortium, and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development for organizing this event and bringing us together today. Last year, Prime Minister Abe held the first ever TCFD Summit, signaling the importance of TCFD not only for Japan, but also for the rest of the world. Today, we gather together again, this time virtually, to ensure the financial community is prepared to preserve and protect the health and stability of the global economy, even as climate change accelerates in every corner of the world. The good news is that due to the efforts of METI, the Japanese Ministry of the Environment, and leaders across government, business, and finance, climate risk disclosure is seeing remarkable growth in Japan and around the world. Since the TCFD was created in 2015, Japan has been a global leader, driving support for the task force recommendations, and to this day remains a critical ally in encouraging implementation. Currently, Japan accounts for 300 TCFD supporters, the most of any country. The TCFD consortium in particular has been integral to this success, establishing itself as a trusted partner to Japanese companies and investors as they seek to move from support to actual implementation of the TCFD recommendations. It is a strong model for how financial and non-financial actors can work together to improve the transparency that is a foundation for more effective capital markets and a more resilient global economy. We appreciate the consortium's efforts to foster dialogue between industrial and financial organizations and assess both risks and, importantly, opportunities. We are also glad to see the TCFD consortium's important work to further discussion about effective and efficient climate disclosure, including through its recently published Guidance 2.0, which aims to make TCFD recommendations business as usual. The summit's mission to accumulate and share companies' experiences and learnings from climate risk disclosure is important to fully realize the goals of the TCFD recommendations. Convening this regular discussion in Japan is especially valuable as it provides institutions and industries across sectors with knowledge and insights critical to successful adoption and implementation of the TCFD recommendations. And as we continue to expand and improve decision-useful climate-related financial information, we will increasingly see the mobilization of investment necessary to accelerate sustainable economic growth. Whether you represent a financial or non-financial company, a pension fund, or a government organization, you are acutely aware that climate change is a key financial risk and increasingly an extraordinary potential opportunity. In terms of physical risk, one must look no further than this year's devastating flooding in the APAC region or the wildfires in the American West to recognize the potential for climate change to weaken economic growth, including by adversely affecting capital stock, labor supply, and overall returns. And as more nations implement mitigation strategies, new climate policies could leave non-compliant firms and institutions exposed to significant transition risk. This is especially true in carbon-reliant sectors. According to recent research, in Japan alone, as much as $71 billion in coal assets could be at risk as renewables attract greater investment. As climate change increasingly shapes the future of industries across the global economy, we know that financial decisions will have to take its risks and opportunities into account. Firms that neglect the long-term implications will not be able to compete successfully. But companies that look ahead, setting net zero carbon targets, and developing products and services that support a more resilient future can thrive. As Prime Minister Abe has said, measures against global warming are no longer a cost. They are a source of competitiveness. By coming together today at the TCFD Summit, Japanese institutions and businesses are demonstrating their commitment to meeting our highest environmental goals by accurately and transparently reporting exposure to climate risk. We know that meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement requires us to expand green investment, including investments in companies that are prioritizing innovation, development, and implementation of low-carbon technologies and strategies. With clear, consistent climate-related disclosures, asset managers, investors, and other users of climate-related financial information will be able to make better-informed investment decisions capable of improving our environmental and social outcomes. In this way, transparent disclosure is a key step to mobilizing the investment needed to transition to a more resilient, sustainable global economy. We have an exciting year ahead at TCFD. We will continue working to expand and deepen global support for our recommendations across business and financial sectors. We remain committed to partnering with supporters around the world to accelerate adoption and implementation. We'll also be releasing a number of important materials in the coming months. First, we'll be issuing guidance to help companies better understand and implement the risk management component of the TCFD recommendations and separate guidance to support companies with scenario analysis. In November, the TCFD will also release its annual status report, which provides an overview of disclosure practices aligned with the task force's recommendations, examines existing climate-related financial disclosure, and explores the challenges preparers and users of these disclosures face. While we are seeing significant momentum, more work must be done to increase climate risk disclosure and unlock investment for a truly climate-resilient economy. Finally, we'll be issuing a public consultation soliciting input from financial institutions to understand their current practices and views on decision-useful, forward-looking metrics. Early adopters like those in Japan are in a strong position to help define and shape global regulatory efforts on climate-related financial disclosure based on their experiences. Our ultimate goal is for the information elicited by the TCFD recommendations to become commonplace in financial reporting, and we need companies and institutions successfully implementing climate risk disclosure to illuminate the path forward. I want to close by thanking you all again for joining this critical summit to share experiences and lessons in adopting and implementing the TCFD recommendations. I hope that the spirit of partnership, cooperation, and collaboration that has brought us together today will encourage you to continue to lead on the implementation journey. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the end of the welcome message and the opening remarks. Participants online, please go back to the timeline and join the next session, opening session. The opening session, expectations for the TCFD summit, will now commence. First, Mr. Peter Backer, President of CEO of WBCSD, will give a speech.
Hello, my name is Peter Bakker, and I'm the President and CEO of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, or WBCSD for short. It's an honor to join and address the second edition of the TCFD Summit today, after a first successful edition, which we convened in Tokyo last year, together with the TCFD Consortium of Japan, and at the invitation of the Japanese Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. I want to recognize and acknowledge the continued leadership of Japanese businesses, investors and government committed to decarbonization and transparency. Much has changed since we last met in 2019, and these are now critical and challenging times as the global pandemic has unmasked our interdependencies and vulnerabilities in the face of systemic risk, highlighting the stress we place on the environment and in many places greatly increased inequality. Businesses' approach to resilience, purpose, society, and the environment are being called into question. The disconnect in the financial system between financial returns and environmental and social impacts calls for a comprehensive response. More than ever, the TCFD recommendations are the most important and transparent leverage to link another systemic risk, climate change, to company decisions and capital market valuations. Over the last year, we have seen significant progress on TCFD support and implementation, with an 80% increase in support numbers and over 300 Japanese organizations represented. We've seen regulatory developments in the European Union, New Zealand, Canada, and the UK, amongst other jurisdictions, as well as with supervisory and security organizations. Disclosures are also improving, both in terms of numbers and quality. At the same time, there's still much room for improvement, as disclosure of the potential financial impact of climate change on businesses, strategies, and financial planning in particular remains low. The TCFD has focused its efforts through the year on the development of guidance related to risk management, scenario analysis, and metrics, which will provide vital insights to support practitioner practice. And momentum is building around the COP26 private finance strategy, which clearly describes the role that TCFD can play to ensure that every financial decision takes climate change into account. Simple accounting rules around meaningful ESG indicators towards the delivery of science-based targets, driving the risk assessment, strategic scenario building, and management decision-making, like TCFD is prescribing, will bring us towards the sustainable world that will serve all people and protect our planet. To accelerate progress, we must now focus on how climate and sustainability-related information is used in the investor-to-corporate relationship, and how businesses and investors can integrate sustainability in valuation, incentives, strategic and capital allocation decisions. We must create a capital market that rewards more sustainable businesses with a lower cost of capital, and thus allocate more financial capital to the critical system transformations ahead of us. That is why today's TCFD Summit is so important, bringing together companies, investors, regulators, and other stakeholders to build momentum and a shared understanding needed to build forward better together. I look forward to today's discussions and the solutions and progress that will follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Professor Ito Kunio, Chair of the TCFD Consortium and Director of Hitotsubashi CFO Education and Research Center, will give a speech.
Welcome to TCFD Summit 2020. As a chair of the consortium and the co-host of the event, I'd like to express my deep gratitude to all of you, making it possible to hold the TCFD Summit 2020 online in this difficult time due to COVID-19. At the summit last year, we shared fundamentally important ideas with investors and managers around the world, from divestment to engagement. Disclosure of the opportunities as well as risk is important. The summit was very fruitful. Japan also hosted the Green Innovation Summit at the Prime Minister's official residence and the Prime Minister's reception. I believe it was internationally recognized that Japan was promoting TCFD disclosure through cooperative efforts by the private sector and the government. After the summit, the momentum for TCFD disclosure has been further growing. Today, more than 1,400 organizations are supporting the TCFD recommendations globally, of which more than 300 are Japanese entities, largest number of supporters in the world. Japanese entities are not only the largest supporter in number, but have been steadily improving the quality of disclosure. It is worth noting that about 70% of the members of the TCFD consortium are non-financial organizations. I can say a good trend has been established in Japan. Those who emit more CO2, such as manufacturers and energy companies, voluntarily take proactive measures against climate change and disclose their information, while investors positively evaluate these disclosure. TCFD Consortium released the TCFD Guidance 2.0 at the end of July this year, which is a revision of the TCFD guidance published by the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry in 2018. In the updated guidance, sector-specific commentary on financial food companies was added to steel, chemical, automobile, energy, and electronic sectors of the initial version. The Green Investment Guidance, released at the summit last year, provides a guidance for investors and financial institutions. It especially explains how to read and understand opportunities. The TCFD Consortium has also started a project titled GIG Supporters by investors who utilize green investment guidance for actual investment decisions and engagement. As you may know from the key takeaways of the TCFD summit last year, the TCFD Consortium was assigned homework to collect and disseminate best practice from the world, including Asia. So we earnestly completed the assignment by collecting 75 examples of best practice in Japan and abroad, representing various stages of disclosure to enhance the TCFD Guidance 2.0. Japanese are known for diligence. Through these activities by the consortium, we found that more than 90% of the consortium members consider supporting TCFD and disclosure in accordance with the recommendations have been beneficial to them. This is a typical Japanese-style initiative where government and the private sector cooperate hand in hand instead of control. We believe it works in a positive manner. I think that the agenda for this year's summit is first, how to implement this TCFD disclosure into corporate activities, and second, new possibilities of TCFD. Regarding the first agenda, the importance of sector-specific opportunities and the sharing of experience in so-called scenario analysis will also be discussed in working level session at panel 1 and panel 2, where leading companies on TCFD disclosure are invited. The discussion can be further active, backed by the collection of the best practice worldwide by the consortium. To contribute to the second agenda, message from the study group under MEDI I'm chairing will be presented at panel 3 in terms of new possibilities of TCFD. As Mr. Mark Carney noted in his speech last year, 50 shades of green rather than binary classification is important in response to the climate change. In line with this recognition, initiatives in transitions and innovations, as well as the potential of TCFD disclosure, will be also talked at the panel 1 and panel 3. While the future of the global economy remain uncertain, efforts to address climate change are urgent. To achieve sustainable society, we should take the climate change as an opportunity to shift corporate management over the medium to the long-term period. Since the last year's summit, TCFD has gathered more attention globally. Alignment to various disclosure standards and mandatory disclosure based upon TCFD have been discussed. As an organization of the world's largest number of companies supporting TCFD recommendations, the consortium will further accelerate our initiatives in implementing TCFD recommendations from a practical perspective and through a good cooperation between the private and public sectors. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Miyazono Masataka, President of Government Pension Investment Fund, will give a speech.
皆様こんにちは。
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Masataka Miyazono, the President of Government Pension Investment Fund, or GPIF Japan. I'm honored to make a speech at this TCFD Summit 2020 today. GPIF considers climate change as one of the important themes of ESG, and we declared our support for TCFD recommendations in December 2018. Since last year, we have disclosed climate-related information in accordance with the recommendations published by TCFD. First of all, I would like to explain why GPIF promotes ESG activities. GPIF is a public pension fund which manages pension reserves with asset under management of 160 trillion Japanese yen, which is collected from Japanese public. We invest this asset in domestic and foreign capital markets. Due to this large asset size, we diversify our portfolio and hold approximately 5,000 stocks and 14,000 bonds. Investors like us who have huge assets and globally diversified portfolio are called universal owner. Our pension reserve is a part of Japanese public pension system, which is designed for a 100 years financial plan, and this is managed to avoid placing excessive burdens on future generations. GPIF, as a universal owner and cross-generational investor, is required to achieve stable investment returns over the long term. As such, sustainable corporate value by each investee company and the sustainable, stable growth of the entire capital market is critical for GPIF. Since environmental issues and social issues will inevitably impact the capital market over the long term, we believe that it is essential to reduce the negative impact of these issues on the capital market in order to achieve sustainable investment returns. Although the potential impact may vary in size, climate change risks occur simultaneously across all companies and asset classes. And these risks cannot be completely eliminated simply through diversification. At the very least, climate change risks are highly likely to manifest over the long term. Therefore, GPIF believes that asset owners should take the lead in addressing them. At GPIF, we've taken actions such as announcing our support for the TCFD. GPIF has just published ESG Report 2019, in which we, for the first time, analyzed physical risks and opportunities in GPIF's portfolio in terms of information disclosure related to climate change. One interesting discovery made from the results of this year's analysis was the possibility that Japanese companies may actually increase in value as a result of international initiatives to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to meet goals such as the 2 degrees Celsius target. While it is generally understood that companies incur additional costs in reducing GHG emissions to meet this target, a more holistic analysis incorporating the environmental technological opportunities inherent in achieving the target reveals that in some cases, the boost to corporate value resulting from such technologies actually exceeds the cost of reducing GHG emissions. This tendency is particularly noticeable among domestic equities, for which the boost from opportunities related to environmental technologies was stronger than for foreign equities. According to this result, there are a lot of opportunities for Japanese companies to increase corporate profits. As GPIF invests 25% of assets in domestic equities, the right evaluation of opportunities for Japanese companies would be crucial to improve our long-term return. GPIF continues to address sustainability of the entire market by disclosing ESG-related information by ourselves, starting from climate-related financial information. We hope this TCFD summit would further stimulate various activities by participants in the investment chain. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Lawrence Fink, Chairman and CEO of BlackRock, will give a speech.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts with all of you, if only in the form of this video message. I am sincerely sorry that I am unable to be with you in person today. I was delighted, though, to receive the invitation to join this TCFD Summit 2020. As one of the founding members of the TCFD, this is a very important opportunity for us at BlackRock, and an important moment for all of us committed to what TCFD stands for, to share our thoughts on the progress around TCFD. At BlackRock, we are a fiduciary to our clients. We invest their money, not ours. And most of these clients are saving for long-term goals like retirement. So our goal is to help our clients maximize long-term sustainable returns. That is why we engage with companies whom our clients are invested with, encouraging those companies to enhance disclosure around the issues that will impact those long-term returns. TCFD aligned reporting is a critical part of that disclosure, and that is why we have been advocating for it for a number of years now. I'm truly delighted that today, more than 1,000 global organizations have declared support for TCFD, including the private sector companies with a combined market capitalization of nearly $12 trillion. And as we disclose in our annual stewardship report that BlackRock released last week, BlackRock's stewardship team during the past year engaged with 600 companies on TCFD to advocate for enhanced disclosure. Today, I thought I would offer some thoughts about the progress and efforts we make at BlackRock perhaps starting with a subject of what people sometimes call my CEO letter, issued under my name every year. Since 2012, I have written an annual letter to the CEOs of leading companies in which our clients are our shareholders. The letters have encouraged CEOs to take a long-term approach in managing their companies, which we believe is truly essential in driving sustainable growth. Our clients, on who we invest for, rely on long-term sustainable growth and returns to meet their long-term financial goals. This year, I raised the idea that we are in the process of a fundamental reshaping of finance, and that climate risk is investment risk. We also set out a series of announcements regarding our conviction around sustainability and how we ourselves can better align our business with the future of investing. In short, we do believe that sustainability is a new investment standard. As I said in my letter to CEOs and in a separate letter to clients, I believe we are entering a new era of finance, and the investment risks presented by climate change are only set to accelerate a significant reallocation of capital. And companies, investors, and governments must be prepared. Our investment conviction is that sustainability and climate integrated portfolios can provide a better risk-adjusted return to investors over the long term. And with the impact of sustainability on investment returns increasing, we believe that sustainable investing is the strongest foundation for client portfolios going forward. What does it mean? BlackRock places sustainability at the center of how it invests. For example, it means exiting investments that present a high sustainable related risk, such as existing thermal coal production, launching new investment products that screen out fossil fuels, and strengthening our commitment to sustainable and transparency in our investment stewardship activities. Now we are experiencing the unprecedented challenge of a global pandemic and resulting economic, social, and environmental consequences. I do believe COVID has added much urgency to these conversations, meaning that it is forcing us to place more focus on business models that are resilient in the face of the unthinkable. And one clear avenue where we believe there are early examples of this is through incorporating sustainability. COVID has raised pressing questions on how businesses are incorporating sustainability. It puts the consequences of choices we make into sharp relief, exposing issues that we may not have been thinking about previously. Companies continue to face the unprecedented test of their operational resilience and flexibility, while at the same time refocusing their long-term strategies in response to shifting market dynamics and rising social expectations. With that in mind, I want to emphasize that while we are likely to be the beginning of a fundamental reshaping of finance, we continue to remain agile, adept, and focused on ways in which a growing appreciation and incorporation of sustainability as a powerful driver for change. I am grateful to be part of this summit, even if all the way from New York City. It is by convening people like those of us coming together today that would concentrate our collective wisdom to address truly global challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Ronaldo O'Hanley, Chairman and CEO of State Street Corporation, will give a speech.
Hello, my name is Ron O'Hanley, and I am Chairman and CEO of State Street. I am honored to be with you today, and I would like to thank the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry, as well as the World Business Council for Sustainable Development for convening this important summit on TCFD adoption and implementation. We salute Japan's leadership on highlighting the financial risk posed by climate change and urging companies to provide more transparency around how they are managing that risk. For us at State Street, the COVID-19 pandemic has acted as a catalyst, reinforcing the linkages between resiliency and sustainability and accelerating the urgency to strengthen both. Indeed, the dramatic wildfires this year that have engulfed the United States and large tracts of the Arctic and Siberia, Indonesia, Brazil, Argentina, and Australia are but one illustration that time is not on our side for bending the curve on greenhouse gas emissions. We are warming our planet to dangerous levels. In fact, every climate scientist commenting on this year's fires, melting glaciers, widespread typhoons and hurricanes, or other environmental anomalies, has said that climate change is happening faster than their models had anticipated. As Mark Carney notes, climate change is one of the biggest structural shifts in the economy and poses systemic risk to financial stability and the long-term value of the investments we service and manage on behalf of our clients. Like Japan's institutional investors, State Street is a long-term investor. As the third largest provider of index-based investments, including ETFs, we are in effect permanent capital in public markets. For as long as a company is included in an index, we will own it on behalf of our clients. In this regard, Vanguard founder Jack Bogle once said, if you're an active manager and you don't like what a company is doing, you sell it. If you're an index manager, you try to fix it. And that is exactly what drives our active stewardship engagement with listed companies and their boards on issues that are material to their ability to generate long-term value. At the top of the list of most urgent material risks now is climate change. In 2017, State Street committed to adopting the TCFD principles as a strong investor-led framework for reporting on our own management of climate change risk and the transition to a net zero carbon world. Since then, State Street Global Advisors has also asked its portfolio companies to report on how they are managing climate change risk within the TCFD framework. While TCFD is now widely acknowledged as the standard for reporting on climate risk, our stewardship team's engagements with companies show that implementation is not happening comprehensively enough nor fast enough. The biggest challenge observed by our stewardship team is that companies and boards are still responding tactically rather than strategically to the climate change challenge. So while we applaud the progress that has been made, we believe a great deal of work still needs to be done on the governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics around climate change risk. For example, many companies are still struggling to understand how to measure and report Scope 3 emissions or how to conduct rigorous climate scenario analysis. Nonetheless, in general, we believe that the disclosures have been tested and refined and have evolved to the point where policymakers might consider mandatory disclosures, as several countries have signaled. Achieving transparency around the impact of climate change on a company's business strategy will make it easier for investors to understand the sustainability risks and opportunities in their portfolios. At State Street, we are committed to helping companies adopt and implement TCFD disclosures to promote a more sustainable and resilient future that will benefit all of our stakeholders. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak about one of our generation's biggest challenges. Together, we can build a stronger and more sustainable world.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Sugimori Tsutomu, Vice Chair of Keidanren and Representative Director, Chairman of the Board, Group CEO of ENEOS Holdings, will give a speech.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Tsutomu Sugimori, Vice Chair of Keidanren. Keidanren is a comprehensive business organization representing Japanese business, consisting of over 1,500 Japanese major companies and industrial organizations. We have been strongly committed to climate actions since the Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit in 1992. On behalf of Keidanren, I would like to offer my heartfelt congratulations on the second TCFD Summit. We have now facing two global crises, the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change. We should seek the best way to realize the virtuous cycle of environment and growth as we recover from the pandemic. I believe the key is business-led innovation. With this in mind, Kedanren launched a new project Challenge Zero to promote business-led innovation towards a decarbonized society. As of now, over 150 companies and organizations have declared to boldly take on innovation challenges towards a decarbonized society. They have announced ambitious challenges, which cover areas of research and development, social implementation, and finance. For more information, please visit our Challenge Zero website. Early realization of a decarbonized society requires the development and social implementation of net zero emission technologies that reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero. For example, renewables, batteries, nuclear, hydrogen, electric vehicle, and CCUS. However, it would be impossible to achieve decarbonization in a flash with net zero emission technologies alone. In reality, it is also necessary to promote innovation in transition technologies, which are essential for the transition to a decarbonized society, such as energy-saving technologies. In collaboration with the Japanese government, Kedanren strongly promote the Challenge Zero by inviting ESG investments and facilitating collaboration between industry, government, and academia in such a wide range of technological fields. Also, Kedanren have cooperated with the government to create the list of zero-emission challenge companies that is to be released today. And we hope it will lead to further promotion of ESG investment. Movements on a sustainable finance are becoming increasingly active around the world. As I have just mentioned, in order to achieve a smooth transition to a decarbonized society, it is essential to mobilize private investment in a wide range of technological fields, including transition technologies, as well as net zero emission technologies. And it is also important for companies taking on innovation in such fields to be valued by financial institutions and ESG investors. In order to create this positive capital flow, climate-related disclosure based on the TCFD recommendation will offer a basis to business activities. Japan is one of the first countries to develop guidance for effective TCFD disclosure and its utilization. Japanese companies are ready for proactive disclosure based on the guidance, highlighting not only risks, but also investment opportunities in addressing climate change. I would again like to stress that investment in a wide range of technologies, including transition, is essential for realizing a decarbonized society, and that the market of such technologies will continue to grow. I sincerely hope that further disclosure based on the TCFD will promote mutual understanding between industry and investors, spur investment in technological development and social implementation, and invigorate corporate activities. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Mike Kanetsugu, Chairman of Japanese Bankers Association and President of CEO of MUFG Bank, will give a speech.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sugumike, Chairman of the Japanese Bankers Association and the President and the CEO of MUFG Bank. I'd like to thank METI for hosting this event and inviting me to speak. In the 5 years since the Financial Stability Board established the TCFD, 2 of its strategic benefits have become quite clear for the Japanese banking industry. First, as we lend to customers, TCFD guidelines provide valuable context for credit assessment and financing opportunities. In a broad sense, banks are investors and therefore the users of information the guidelines make public. Second, banks issue equities and the bonds in the capital markets, so we need to present a compelling case to investors, and the disclosures on the climate change are becoming a much more important focus. In this sense, banks are benefiting from TCFD as issuers of securities. Let me describe the strategic importance of the guidelines from the perspective of a lender, in other words, a user of the disclosures following the TCFD. To address climate change, our collective goal is to help mitigate and adapt to the new environment on a global basis. To do that, we needed to reorient capital flow toward new technologies and the projects that support that goal. We also need to assess just how green the firms are, but the difficulty is the world is more complex than just green versus brown. Mark Carney has said, we need 50 shades of green, and he's right. Everyone's in a different stage of a transition, companies and technology alike, and the banks have a role to play in accelerating the transition to carbon neutrality. The TCFD is a powerful tool for banks to help accomplish that. It informs our dialogue with the borrowers as we facilitate their decision and the strategy to be greener. Let me give you an example by sharing with you the development of a sustainable finance. Recently, an increasing number of banks have set sustainable finance targets, and they revise their lending policies to clarify what green or sustainable means. MUFG, for instance, has announced a target of 20 trillion yen of sustainable financing by the year 2030. But with new technologies developing so quickly, it's not always easy to assess the value of any given opportunity. We receive a lot of information from the borrowers for assessment purposes, but there are more companies disclose climate-related information in line with the TCFD recommendations. The better job banks can do in understanding the borrower's risk and the strategies, and the more we'll be able to help them. By the same token, if companies openly share what they are doing to support sustainability, not only will their own bankers be able to tailor solutions, but the information can also attract funding from a range of other sources. Now, a word about banks as an issuer of equities and bonds. It's important for any issuer, including banks, to give market participants the appropriate quality and the quality of information to achieve the right valuation. Today's momentum among investors is clear, a near universal acknowledgement that climate change presents a significant investment risk. We've encountered a lot of investors who mention the need of a better quality disclosures on environment-related information. That's why MUFG is enhancing our own disclosures in line with the TCFD framework when we present our strategy and the risks regarding climate change. There is also a matter of universal consistency. With the establishment of the international framework of TCFD, the disclosing party can present investor-friendly information in a relevant, easily comparable manner. This has a great significance for both investor and issuer, a view that's now prevalent in Japan with an increasing number of Japanese Bankers Association members implementing the TCFD recommendations. Finally, I'd like to mention a few gaps we need to address. First, enhancing climate risk-related disclosure for supervisory purposes. In addition to disclosing information to market participants, banks are subject to regulatory oversight. So TCFD disclosure may also be valuable for supervisors to assess micro and macroprudential risks. The bank's balance sheet consists mostly of financial assets, and the regulators are proposing to conduct scenario analysis as a way to measure climate risk exposures. In fact, the NGFS published a set of climate scenarios this past June for banks across the region to use. METI published its TCFD Guidance 2.0, touching on the scenario analysis for banks to disclose their risk exposures. Scenario analysis certainly is a useful tool for quantifying climate risk, but there are practical issues to be addressed, such as how we standardize the model so stakeholders can compare outcomes in a meaningful way. Second, the issue of timelines. For years, banks have played a role in supporting sustainable growth of our customers through lending. But what do we do if a customer isn't green enough? As a responsible bank, we should help that our customers become greener and support its transition to sustainability. This is easier said than done, requires willingness from the customer, and it will take some time. Banks can only become greener when our customers become greener, so there is a mutual dependency. This means we can build a win-win relationship through engagement, and we believe this is our mission in the context of addressing climate change. The TCFD framework is a source of hope that this mission can be fulfilled. Let me close by underscoring the message that we are enthusiastic supporters of the TCFD framework. We look forward to working with all concerned to close the gaps on the comparability and enhancing the disclosure for supervisory risk assessment. Through this journey, I hope our engagement will lead to solutions for the global challenge of climate change. Thank you for listening and have a great meeting.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Negishi Akio, Chair of the Life Insurance Association of Japan and President of Representative Executive Officer and Group CEO at Meiji Yasuda Life Insurance Company, will give a speech.
I am Akio Negishi, Chairman of the Life Insurance Association of Japan, LIAJ. I'm greatly honored by this opportunity to address the TCFD Summit, a key forum for discussion on the global challenge of climate change. I sincerely appreciate this precious occasion to share some insights with you during the COVID-19 pandemic. Throughout the world, climate change is increasingly impacting our social life and business activities. Here in Japan, we are also experiencing unprecedented extreme weather events. Climate change is now high on the national agenda, an issue to be addressed by both the public and private sectors working together. I believe our efforts are now shifting from the activation stage to the consolidation and sophistication stage. Both as life insurers and as asset owners, the life insurance industry considers climate change to be a crucial business challenge. We have therefore promoted the disclosure of climate-related financial information in line with the TCFD recommendations, pushing forward ESG investments and loans, and actively engaging the companies our industry invests with on the theme of climate change. Today, I would like to outline 3 of the initiatives taken by the LIAJ to that end. The first initiative is the preparation of a climate change starter's guide. While every one of us should take ownership of the climate change issue, it has been very difficult to understand what is at stake because of the technical nature of the issues and their broad impact. Therefore, the LIAJ produced a guidebook last year to provide basic information on climate action. Targeting people put in charge of climate action for the first time, the guidebook covers a wide range of topics, from basic questions such as why climate action matters to considerations for actual practitioners. The LIAJ has posted Japanese and English versions of the guidebook on its website. We have also distributed it to life insurance companies and receiving favorable responses from management executives as well as practitioners. The second initiative concerns collective engagement. The LIAJ has been involved in collective engagement since fiscal 2017 to increase the efficiency of our stewardship activities. We have conducted annual dialogues with our investment targets on the themes of improving shareholder returns and improving the disclosure of ESG information. Last year, we added another topic to these dialogues, that is, improving the disclosure of climate change information. Specifically, we urge large GHG emitters whose information disclosure policies, including on climate change, need to be verified to enhance their disclosure of information regarding climate change. Our third initiative concerns helping to develop TCFD Guidance 2.0. This year, we helped the TCFD Consortium develop TCFD Guideline 2.0 by providing substantial input to the creation of the section on life insurance. The guidance features a balanced description of the 2 aspects of the life insurance industry: life insurers and asset owners. Disclosure examples for asset owners include cases of green finance, cumulative investments and loans, and engagement activities related to climate change. Those are the 3 initiatives that I would like to share with you. For over a century, the life insurance industry has based its activities on the concepts of coexistence and co-prosperity and mutual assistance. Climate change is a real challenge for coexistence and co-prosperity on a global scale. Individual stakeholders need to take action and help find solutions to the problem. On behalf of the life insurance industry, we remain committed to actively working with you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Miyahara Koichiro, President of CEO of Tokyo Stock Exchange, will give a speech.
Hello, everyone. I'm Koichiro Miyahara, President and CEO of Tokyo Stock Exchange. I'm disappointed that I cannot see you all in person today, but I'm very pleased to see this TCFD summit being held again this year. And I would like to express my gratitude to all who have made it possible despite the circumstances. Last month, the US government agency NOAA announced that this August was the second hottest summer on the Earth after 2016, and the hottest summer in the Northern Hemisphere since records began in 1880. Wildfires have been raging all over the world. Hurricanes and typhoons get bigger and stronger. It seems like recently, hardly a day goes by without hearing some kind of news about the Earth's changing environment. Japan is unique in the way that the government and the private sector have been collaborating to tackle climate change. The TCFD consortium is an excellent example of this. Japan Exchange Group, the parent company of Tokyo Stock Exchange, has been a member of the consortium since its inception and has been an active participant in their discussions. Other examples of public-private collaboration include the TCFD outreach event, the Japan Exchange Group, and the Financial Services Agency have jointly held for the past 2 years. These events provided a platform for institutional investors and listed companies to deepen their understanding of how to use TCFD for information disclosure and engagement. Furthermore, in March this year, Japan Exchange Group and Tokyo Stock Exchange released a practical handbook for ESG disclosure for the benefit of listed companies. The handbook introduces TCFD as one of the main existing disclosure frameworks and encourages companies to use the TCFD recommendations in disclosing information linked to corporate value creation. Global discussions on climate change are now moving towards COP26. As Mr. Carney said in his speech, The Road to Glasgow, attention is being given to the 3 R's: reporting, risk management, and return, and how they can help redirect the flow of private capital toward the aim of net zero world by enabling us to accurately judge risks and opportunities from climate change. To achieve this goal, we must create a virtuous cycle of environment and economy by allocating capital to companies that actively fight climate change, to the transition process, and to innovative technologies. Company disclosure on climate change and investor assessments of corporate value will be vital for this to happen. And this is the goal of TCFD. Today's TCFD Summit is a platform for people from all corners of the globe and in many different roles to gather and discuss how to encourage wider use and implementations of the TCFD recommendations. I look forward to seeing the point made today being put into practice around the world. Thank you for your attention and have a great day.
Thank you. This is the end of the opening session. Participants online, please go back to the timeline and join the next session, special discussion.